Good morning. My name's Richard Hatfield. I'm CEO and founder of Lightning Motorcycle. I'm going to talk a little bit about our products, of where we came from and where we are and where we're going, and how Autodesk has played a part in this, and the challenges of scaling early stage companies. So this is the basic tagline: Ride the future, join the revolution. This is how we approach our electric motorcycles, which are the highest performance motorcycles that you can buy and ride on the street, and they happen to be fully electric. So jump into how we started. So I became a motorcyclist growing up in Iowa at 12 years old, and rode motorcycles most of my life. I've also been involved in motorsports. I've been involved in racing, developing racing cars, building businesses, and was fortunate to win a couple West Coast championships in endurance racing. Also, in '97, a group of friends approached me about driving an electric Porsche that they had developed for a competition, which was really where I first became enthused and intrigued with electric drive systems and batteries. So the initial project that we did was to build an electric motorcycle. So we took a chassis from a Yamaha R1. A friend of mine had a track bike that the engine had failed in, and I talked him into selling that chassis. It was already a good handling, well set up frame. And we sourced some early lithium iron phosphate batteries, in a industrial flex vector drive and an induction motor, and put it together. And it actually exceeded our expectations. It was about 65 horsepower. It had about 70 miles range, would go 100 miles an hour. And the first ride on that bike, there's a famous motorcycle cafe in Northern California called Alice's Restaurant, not the one from Woody Guthrie's song, but another one. And any Saturday or Sunday, you'll see thousands of bikes coming and going. And my home at the time was about a half a mile from there. So I rode the bike to Alice's Restaurant, rode up the hill, accelerated the bike, and was instantly hooked on that feeling of no noise, no vibration, just instant, seamless torque as it shoved me up this hill. And I said, this should be a product. And that was the beginning. And motorcycles are well suited as electric vehicles because the rolling resistance is much less, the aerodynamic resistance is much less, and as you have less energy-dense fuel in electric batteries, having a system that requires less battery has a series of advantages. The advantage of less weight, less cost, and better performance. So being a lifelong motorcyclist, I was convinced that motorcycles would be a great application as electric vehicles. So we immediately embarked on building the second bike. And about 3 blocks from where we were building bikes, Tesla was just getting started. And we had a relationship with some people there. They had some General Motors EV1 motors that had been salvaged from some of the crushed General Motors EV1s. We were able to get one of the motors from J.B. Strobel, and we built a bike, the yellow bike in the image. And we went from about a 65 horsepower to about 165 horsepower. And that bike we then took to Bonneville. We did a speed record with it. We ultimately went 176 miles an hour, which broke a record that had stood for about 35 years. Later, the next year, 2010, we began to race that bike in the AMA Zero Emissions Road Racing that was held with the Pro Series, and we won the North American Championship. And the AMA said that was the first time that any bike had set a land speed record and won a road racing competition. So that was the beginning of Lightning Motorcycle. So we developed the big audacious mission. It's good to have something to aspire to build electric motorcycles that had better performance, better efficiency, better rider experience than the best gas bikes in the world. So when we first set off on that in 2009, 2010, that was not met with a lot of credibility. The thought that you could put batteries in a motorcycle and it could perform as well as a high-performance gas motorcycle was just not thought possible, which is, it's a great challenge to take on. So we used competition to really challenge ourselves and prove that the technology could work. So this is a history of competing in road racing and land speed records. So we were very successful the first year. We won the North American Championship. We won every race but the first race where we took second. And most of the races, we either lapped or came close to lapping the second place bike. In 2011, we took everything that we had learned from that first 2 years, 2009 to 10, and built the first pre-production 218. We took it back to Bonneville, set a two-way record of 215.9 miles an hour and a best time through the timing lights of 218.6, and that was how we named the bike, the LS218. We also road raced that bike, ultimately winning the World Championship race at Le Mans, France with Miguel Duhamel, the 9-time US champion here on gas bikes. And then we went to Pikes Peak to compete at the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb against the gas bikes. So that was really the first instance, I think, that we really achieved the goal of competing against the best gas bikes in the world. The Ducati factory race team was there with 4 tractor trailers. The Honda factory team was there, 120 privateers. And we were successful at taking first place overall, and actually by a margin of over 21 seconds over the second place bike. So in an event like that, I mean, usually it's fractions of a second. So it was a big achievement, and I think it changed a lot of people's perspective on what an electric motorcycle could do. The speed record people said, okay, you can go fast in a straight line, but you'll never be able to run a road course like a gas bike. And Pikes Peak consists of 156 corners. In some places, we're slowing down to below 30 miles an hour, accelerating to 160 by the next. So it's a big challenge, and we felt it was the toughest thing that we had taken on. This is a quick video to try to kind of give you a sense of what it's like to ride one of these bikes. So you'll see that the acceleration, this is a GPS, a screen from camera mounted on the tank during a backup record run. And the acceleration up to 100 was limited by the traction on the salt. From 100 up to 200, it's pretty much full throttle. I think we don't have the audio, huh? Oh, there it is. Ask for it and you get it. You can see that the horizon is becoming an angle in the windscreen, and that was caused by a small aerodynamic imbalance in the bodywork. So the faster the bike went, it had an effect like a wing that pulled it over, and to the rider, it felt a lot more dramatic than what you see in the video. You see at 215 miles an hour, getting the last mile an hour was not easy. So it's actually the rider is moving his body to impact the aerodynamics to try to get the last little bit of speed out. And now we're over the time tracks. He's slowing down, but slowing fairly conservatively. You don't want to make any very quick changes at that speed on a low friction surface like salt. So let's jump into the technology. Thank you. So in developing Lightning, we made the decision to take on a series of engineering challenges, both to generate revenue, which increased the runway of our company, and decrease the amount of investor capital we had to take, and it challenged us and gave us opportunities to learn while earning money. So it's been something that worked well for us. So we've been involved in building 2 electric airplanes. One was built to do stunt shows, the DB5 below, and the other was built to do electric speed records. One of the main takeaways from electric airplanes is that everything has to be very, very light. Batteries are still heavier, much heavier than fuel at 300 to 400 watt-hours per kilogram versus 12,000 watt-hours per kilogram. And they have to be very reliable. Obviously, if something fails, it's much more difficult to pull over and repair it in an airplane. We've also been involved in solar charging. So the deployed rig on this side is actually our motorcycle transporter. So it carries 2 bikes, it carries all the gear that we need for events. It has 3 banks of 3 solar panels, so when you're driving down the road, they fold in and they just cover the roof of the vehicle. When we're stopped at an event, we pull them out. We have 9 panels, and we can harvest enough energy from that to fully charge a bike in a day of good sun. And inside of the truck, we have lithium batteries that store enough charge for 3.5 more bikes. So since 2012, the only thing that we've used to charge our bikes at any events is the electricity that we've used from the roof of the truck. And there are a couple of reasons to do it. The first 2 years when we did this, people would come up, and there are always people that detract from what you do, and would say, all you're doing, we had to use generators to charge the bikes if we didn't have the solar and the battery backup. People would say, well, all you're doing is burning gasoline there instead of in the bike. You're not doing anything. So we wanted to show that once it was electric, you have choices of how you get the energy and where you get it from. The tractor trailer was a proposal that we made to the MotoGP organizers, Dorna, for charging their race series bikes. We've also been involved in electric tractor trailers and fuel cell hybrid buses. The trucks were used to move containers from the Long Beach Harbor to the trains, and the buses have been in use in the Bay Area and the East Bay now for, I think, 7 or 8 years. There are a couple of million miles on this fleet. And one of the big takeaways from that was how critical it is to use weatherproof connectors on electric vehicles. So, a $1.50 connector would be used instead of a $2.50 connector, and that would take $1.5 million fuel cell hybrid bus and leave it stranded on the side of the road. So we've, it seems like a small thing, but it was something that, the 3 large multinational corporations that worked together in building these buses didn't get right, and we had to repair. So we've tried to address that on all of our products. We've also been involved in electric ATVs and UTVs. We developed some ATVs that were used by Border Patrol for monitoring the borders. We've also been involved in batteries for competitive sailboats, transpac boats, different race boats. And this was a real study in how do you corrosion-proof batteries and electronics. We were also involved in developing a plug-in hybrid kit for early Priuses. So we started this in 2008, I believe, when we first did this. So it was a 10 kilowatt hour lithium pack that went in the back of a Prius, a set of CAN control boards that would convince the Prius system to use the battery rather than the gas. And we spun that off into a company and sold quite a number of kits. And interestingly enough, we went to Palo Alto Research Center and to attend a presentation that General Motors was doing pre-release of the Chevy Volt. And all of the specs that they were using to compare their targets for the Volt were from our Prius kit. So, we were kind of surprised that, when you throw a stone in a lake, how far the ripples can go. We've also been involved in off-grid storage. Some of the bigger ones have been in excess of a megawatt hour. So one of the interesting projects, and it has been working with Autodesk on generative design. So early on, when Autodesk was first working on the software package, they contacted us, and we were involved with their team in developing a 3D printed swing arm with carbon fiber wrap, which was a good product. And it was a kickoff on the generative design software. And we were also then involved at the pre-kickoff on an aluminum casted version. So the target of this was to make it lighter than our existing swing arm and equally as strong in one direction and still have flex in the other direction. So one of the challenges of a motorcycle swing arm is if it moves, if it's not rigid enough, then it becomes kind of unpredictable feeling to the operator when they're riding at speed. So if it's not strong enough, but at the same time, when the bike is in a very big lean angle, it needs to be flexible because the suspension is now working at an angle and the bumps are at a different angle. So it's a challenge. And this swing arm that you see was about 30% lighter than our existing swing arm, had the strength in the appropriate place, and looks like it could be a good step forward. And so we sent a lot of this out to customers and potential customers, and was really curious about the aesthetics. How would this be received? And we were pleasantly surprised that 65–70% of the people saw the value in it and thought that it was very interesting and a step forward. Of course, there are always people that resist change. So this is kind of a summary of a series of projects we've been involved developing scooters for Chinese companies, a whole series of different engineering projects, and then how we've taken what we've learned in those projects and incorporated those into our product. So when we first began this, we wanted to analyze what are the objections to people buying electric motorcycles. So the objections are what you would imagine. The range was not as good as a gas motorcycle. The charge times at 8 hours were too long. Somebody didn't want to ride, use it up, and then have to wait 8 hours to get back. The performance was much less than their gas alternatives. The designs were not as good. And the price was higher. So, the early electric motorcycle that came to market were basically asking people to pay a lot more for a lot less. So we chose to address all of those. So using high power onboard chargers, level 2, level 3 offboard, we can get our charge times down to 80% to around 30 minutes. We're actually working with a new battery company right now testing some cells where it can be charged to 80% in 5 minutes. So at 5 minutes, it's not that much longer than it would take to fill your gas tank on a bike. The range, we have 3 battery packs. The largest one can provide over 150 miles range at real use freeway speed. The performance we've demonstrated with the 218, it's the highest performance bike that you can buy in speed, gas or electric. The handling we've demonstrated is as good or better than any gas alternative. And then the user experience, you know, the regenerative braking, you can operate the bikes with one control, accelerate, decelerate. You don't have a clutch, you don't have a transmission. A lot of new riders, you know, find the barrier of getting used to a clutch. You know, a lot of new riders don't have the experience of ever driving a clutch and manual transmission. So getting them on a bike, and, you know, being on a bike is already somewhat intimidating, and, you know, you have to rev it up and match the speeds, and not too much, not too little. So, you know, there's been a big drop-off in the US in motorcycle purchases and motorcycle riders. And we see that electrics can make it, you know, much more approachable and easier for people to get, you know, come up to speed on it. And the maintenance is also much lower on the electrics. So the next big challenge that we've been dealing with is commercialization. You know, how do we go from building, you know, limited production, you know, high-end, low quantity bikes to series production? You know, it's always a challenge for any early stage company. It's a whole different set of disciplines and challenges. So the first thing we did was we opened a factory in Zhejiang province in China, where we could build components and do it at a much more cost-effective basis than here. With CNCs, with robotics, and a large enough investment, you know, that can be done here as well. But at a lower investment, there are still advantages. So this is the development process of the bike. So the image, a whole series of different design iterations, looking at possibilities, you know, narrowing down with our buyers what they like, what they don't like, the clay, the processing, the iterations, the initial bodywork, different colors and schemes. And so just kind of a quick overview of that process. So what's it like to ride a 218 mile an hour electric motorcycle?
Superbike buyers, I've got bad news for you. Even if you've just picked up a brand new R1, I'm afraid you haven't got the fastest bike on the market. Not by a long way. In fact, if you want 1999 Hayabusa levels of bragging rights, now you've got to go electric. This is the Lightning LS218, and it holds the land speed record for the world's fastest production bike at 218 miles an hour, which is about 350 kilometers an hour. It's got a lithium battery, a liquid-cooled 380 volt IPM electric motor, and bugger all moving parts. It makes about the same 200 horsepower your R1 does, but it smashes out more than twice the torque, and it hits peak torque immediately. Imagine holding the pedal to the floor on an Opel Astra 1.6 litre turbo. The Lightning bike has access to that much twisting force at all times, but it weighs nearly 7 times less. It is really easy, with one notable exception, which we'll get to in a minute. The throttle response is absolutely spot on. Because it's electric, there's no weird mechanical reason why you can't have a beautifully smooth pickup off a closed throttle and a perfectly linear power curve with no dips or surges. It's lovely, you just get what you ask for at all times. The regenerative engine braking is set up so strong on this bike that it really doesn't feel like you need your brakes much at all around town. Just roll off the throttle and it'll slow you right down, and it'll put some power back in the battery while it's at it.
Yeah, the braking's pretty full on, isn't it?
Except in this case, it's twist and gone.
A lot of gas bike riders will say, I want a gearbox. I want a bike I can work up and down through the gears as I go through the twisties. I don't want something that's stuck in 6th gear the whole time. To those people I'd say, why? What if power, massive power, was available at any time? All you had to do was pull the throttle. Wouldn't that be better?
Mind you, at this point I still hadn't made it all the way to full throttle yet, so we took the LS218 up to the Skyline Road so I could let her rip. Apologies in advance for any bad language. I'm trying to cut down, but I'm only human.
Oh, wow. Okay, so immediately spun up the back tyre. Immediately spun up the back tyre. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ! Oh! Oh my God! Oh! Oh, shit! Oh my God!
Let's try that again and see if I can say something intelligent this time.
Oh God, here's a hill. Full throttle! Oh my God! Oh my God! I have never in my life felt acceleration like this. Oh, 200 horsepower. Twice the torque of a Benelli. Oh no. Oh my God. Oh my God.
So they say that a picture's worth 1,000 words. I think a video might be worth 10,000 words. So the bike does make roughly the same power as a Tesla Roadster, but weighs 495 pounds instead of 2,800 pounds. So it is exciting to ride. So the next challenge that we had was the value equation. So, you know, it's one thing to build a $38,000 very high performance bike, but it's another thing to compete head to head in value and performance with the gas bike. So that was the next challenge we took on, was what we call our lightning strike. How do we build a bike that rivals the best gas bikes in performance and rider experience and also in price? And as a small company competing against large multinational companies that are building millions of bikes, that's not a small challenge. So the Strike is a super sport, so it has higher bars, lower pegs, a little more comfortable to ride. The price starts at $12,900, which is competitive with what a lot of gas alternatives in this level would cost. So it's a bike that's comfortable on the track. It's very, very rideable on a daily basis. It's a bike that we can have virtually anybody test ride, which you can imagine a 218 mile an hour bike. You don't let everybody get on it to test ride. It's in top scale, it's 120 horsepower and 180 foot-pounds of torque, which is still a lot of torque, but without a gearbox and torque multiplication. Again, it's a very user-friendly bike. So this is the process of developing the Strike. So starting with concepts, iterating through, trying to find out what potential customers liked, kind of zeroing in on some various styles. Clay modeling, even with the great software modeling, wind tunnel testing, initial carbon fiber prototype production, and then test rides. So even with the great modeling tools, clay modeling is still a big part of this. If you're looking at CAD or rendering on a computer monitor, you're still looking at a 3D image in a 2D screen. So, building something there's an element of sculpture to this, of letting the light play off of it, and you know, just what's the emotional response you get from the, you know, from the form, and it, you know, it seems like an overstatement to some people, but if you know, if this kind of a purchase in the developed world, you know, the U.S. and Europe, if it doesn't pull on your heartstrings, if it doesn't make you feel like you need it, people buy something else. So here's a spec chart, how we compare against, you know, some other alternatives. And then here's you know, kind of a selection of reaction from when we originally went to press with the bike. So in general, we think that this is it's a disruptive product. It's a product that changes how people see the market. So this is really the challenge, scaling the company, building new products that appeal to a broader segment of riders, and bringing new riders into our sport. So another part of this for us is building a brand, building something that's, you know, aspirational, that people want to own, want to be involved with. And for us, we went the path of competition. You know, there's a lot of people that follow racing, a lot of enthusiasts who follow what's possible. And so it's a way of using these dollars both to improve our technology and to make awareness of what we're doing. And it's all of the media, everything that we've done so far to make people aware has been all earned media. We haven't paid for anything. Everything has been, we've had these opportunities because the product was exciting and journalists wanted to write about it. So we've had exposure around the world in MotoGP races and endurance racing. We've been in a whole series of magazines. The Race Engine, which is a trade journal for MotoGP, Formula One, and racing, nominated us as Race Engine of the Year. And for those engineers out there, you're probably saying, how is a motor nominated as an engine? Especially in a magazine dedicated to engineers, but we were happy to be included. So again, we've been in about 100 magazines around the world, and on several History Channel, Discovery Channels, and one movie. Our win at Pikes Peak was covered by the On Any Sunday movie. And then we've had some industry recognition. So last year, we were nominated by the Battery Innovation Center for our contributions to the battery electric vehicle, for making battery motorcycles something that people wanted to own. More media. So one of the reasons that we do this is, you know, everybody has a set number of days on the planet, and we were at a point saying, you know, how do we want to use the rest of our life? What can we do to contribute and leave the world a slightly better place? And so this was our tack. This is using the skills that we had and addressing a problem that we think everyone's facing. So, you know, as I'm sure a lot of people are aware, the last 4 years have been some of the hottest years on record. The transportation is a huge contributor to CO2 and an area that can be addressed. And in the developing world, motorcycles are sold to a set price. So, and that's where most of the motorcycles are used and most of the miles are put on. So in India, you know, 90+% of the bikes are under $1,000. So that doesn't allow for the type of emissions equipment. So the average commuter motorcycle in the world has much higher emissions than the average car in the world. And there's a big push around the world to move to electric transportation. So we thought, take our team, our skill sets, this is the best place for us to focus on. This is a huge market in the world in general. So in the world in general, there's about 110 million motorcycles, scooters sold each year. In the US, it's about 400,000 units. So when we started this, I thought the US was the center of the motorcycle universe, and 13 years later down this journal, I found that places, Southeast Asia, India, that's really where the big markets are. And currently, the charging infrastructure is being built out around the world. The government is supporting this. And we really see that in the next few years, this adoption will increase dramatically. So our focus has been one motorcycle at a time, trying to get them out, but kind of humorously making the statement that sometimes focusing on one motorcycle rider can have a ripple effect and impact more. So in summary, our belief is that the best place we can apply our skill set, our team, is electrifying two-wheel transportation. This is where we can have the biggest impact. And our big audacious dream at this point is to see in the near foreseeable future the electrification of most two-wheel transportation in the world. So thank you all for your attention, and any questions? Yes.
Yes, very interesting story, and thank you for sharing. I was very interested. Early in the story, you talked about pulling up to the bike location out in California. That initial thrust up the hill. What was the reception at that location? Did the people there recognize what you were pulling up on?
Some people did. I would say in general, the majority of the motorcyclists that we've ran into have been very excited to see the new technology. I think with anything new, there's a process of some people not accepting it initially, and over time, with enough proof, more people accept it. But I was particularly surprised there'd be a group of Harley-Davidson guys, and you have that potato, and all of that Harley-Davidson kind of feel, and yet they were still very enthusiastic. So yeah, the reception has been good, and the more that we've showed what's possible, the better it's been. Yes.
Thank you it was a great presentation, and I really admire you taking your passion, especially as a kid, and doing what you did with it, and actually contributing to making the world a better place. So thank you for that. My question is, as you roll out into more commercial, what are you doing for safety? Motorcycles have that where it's, they're involved in accidents, and when they are, they're very catastrophic. What are you doing that maybe that you can learn from the car industry about increasing safety?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are in discussions. So there's a lot of work being done right now with vehicle-to-vehicle communication, a lot of work with vehicle-to-road communication, a lot of work being done on autonomous driving. So all of this can be applied to motorcycles to make them safer. We're also working on some enclosed motorcycles that can be used, every day of the year, regardless of weather, that provide crash protection, that are more comfortable. So yeah, it's motorcycles in general, the technology is typically adopted in 3 to 7 years after cars. So when you see fuel injection on cars, fuel injection became common on motorcycles 3 to 5 years later. Same with ABS brakes and rider controls. And I think that we'll see more and more of the vehicle-to-vehicle and autonomous moving into bikes. And again, we're really excited about the enclosed motorcycles that we're developing, because once they're enclosed, you can make them much, much more aerodynamic, and you can increase the range and performance of the vehicles by 2.5 times. So great question, thank you.
Right here. So earlier in the presentation, you talked about how you initially went over to Tesla and was adopting some of their technology, or at least talking to them. Do you still have a partnership with them? I mean, it seems like you have two different markets and you could really share technology and information for the common cause.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So there are communications with Tesla. It's a major part of what we see of expanding this is working with a company like Tesla or one of the large legacy brands where we could scale rapidly. I agree with you. I think that there's a natural fit between what we're doing and what Tesla's doing. We still have some relationship with people there. I think Elon in general has made statements that he had an incident on a motorcycle early on and is not as supportive of motorcycles. But I think, again, based on the other question, as more safety becomes involved or available to bikes, then it should be a good fit. But ultimately, how all of that works is how personalities get together. So we're in conversations with a number of companies. Thank you.
Hi. It seems that a lot of your prototyping phase and iterations are still living in the traditional kind of world and not so digital. Do you see, like, in the future there to be more chances for the VR, AR, or any of these more sculpting programs to help along with that process?
Could you repeat the question? I can't hear it very clearly up here.
Yeah. You talked earlier about the prototyping process and how you go through the concept phase, and then usually it sticks to traditional sculpting currently. And do you see that moving into a more digital form as to help supplement those, or is that going to stay in a more traditional world?
Yeah, I think all of the tools available, that make it more rapid. I think in the near term, it's kind of a hybrid between using digital tools and still doing some manual work is the fastest way. But yeah, it's critical to use all the tools we can to speed this up. And I think the generative design will be a big player in that. Yes.
Thanks again for an inspiring presentation. In terms of batteries, what are you seeing in terms of the lifespan of the various battery packs, and do you see any change in performance over time?
Yeah. So the batteries are definitely the most exciting area of where the most rapid change is taking place. And I was talking with Jamie. Next week, we're back in Michigan again at Novi. Novi has the battery electric vehicle show next week, and it's the single biggest place in each year in this country where engineers and companies get together to share new information on batteries and electric vehicles. So as I said, we're working with a company that we're going to do some demos on a run doing 5-minute charges. The energy density is continuing to increase dramatically. There's one company that we're involved with that has some batteries that aren't ready for production, but they're 30 times lighter and smaller than the best batteries that are being sold right now. And they work. They're not ready for prime time. But knowing that it can work and it's in the laboratory is really encouraging. So, our position has been battery agnostic. We build our vehicles so we can rapidly incorporate whatever technology is is best suited for that particular application. And some cases it's longer range, in some cases it's quicker charge and quicker discharge, more power. But yeah, I think that currently the amount of resources that are being allocated to develop new batteries, it's very few other industries where that level of resources are being focused. So very exciting, and things are changing quickly. And one of the byproducts of racing and competition and winning championships has been that we've had access to companies that are doing new technology because they would like to see us test them and spotlight them. So, some of the people that we've worked with said, why do you spend time and money racing and doing speed records and doing Pikes Peak and all of that? But the doors that opens, we just couldn't get through any other way. Yes. Okay.
I think what you've done is amazing, and you are actually at a market of something I would like to have and to ride. I have a 100-mile daily drive commute. You're at a range now in your basic bike that I can do that in, and I have been a long time motorcycle rider, and I quit when my daughter was born, and now she's 20 and she wants to ride a motorcycle. And she is very much into the green aspect of lifestyle. And we had the opportunity to teach her to ride on a Harley-Davidson Livewire, and which for me was a great bike because I'd like to have another bike. But right at this point, my question to you is, I am not comfortable, due to my age, in the sport bike position that you have. I found the Livewire and the upright to that, or an older UJM motorcycle, the typical riding position. Are you going to make a motorcycle, which I hate to say, more aimed at older riders like me?
Yeah, great question. The riding position on the Strike is much more upright than on the 218. 218 is a pure sport bike, and you're in full, track type crouch. The Strike is much more like a Ducati Super Sport, so much higher, but it's in between. It's not as upright as a Livewire. And the quick answer is yes, we will do bikes that are more traditional, upright bikes and adventure bikes, but currently we're focusing on more sport bike type fairings, because in all of our CFD and aerodynamic testing, as soon as you move to a bike like a Livewire, I mean, it literally cuts your range by a really, really dramatic amount. Human beings are really very unaerodynamic. We weren't developed for that. As soon as you're sitting straight up, you almost double the aerodynamic drag and reduce the range to about 50 or 60%. So if you look at the Livewire, you'll see at 70 miles an hour, it has a 70-mile range, where our bike is a 140-mile range. And part of that is because of the aerodynamic work we've done and the choices that Harley-Davidson made on trying to make it a more traditional type bike. We will move in that direction, and as batteries get better and better, it will make it easier to do that with less range compromise. But currently, the Livewire is about 540 pounds, and the range is pretty limited. We think for our market, having a more traditional sport bike fairing and better aerodynamics is a good choice for the next product. But it's something to really wrestle with, because the demographic that's spending more money is buying more upright bikes like BMW GSs and those type. But it's a function of optimizing the compromises.
So I have a question on charging.
Yes.
Currently today, if you go out, Tesla's got their charging, and it seems like everybody's doing their own thing. The draw with gasoline is everybody can pull up and get the same fuel from, whether it's a motorcycle or a car. Do you see the day, and when would it be to where every electric vehicle will be able to pull in and have a standard connection to charging, Is that something, and apparently that's going to have to be someone outside of just a manufacturer. It's going to have to be their own business. But is there any thought in that?
So the issue of standardization of charging, it is occurring. So the standard level 2 charger, a J1772, that's probably 80–90% of the chargers in the country. And any electric vehicle can use that charger. Our bikes can use it, any of the cars can use it, Tesla can use it. Tesla built their supercharger network as a kind of a standalone that they don't share with anyone else. I think it was a good choice on their part because they had the objection of charging quickly and being able to use their cars anywhere. But everyone else, in J1772, the standard level 2, any car, including a Tesla, has an adapter that can use that. Our bikes can use that. And that's, again, 90% of the chargers out there. And then in non-Tesla supercharging, there are two main types, CCS, Combined Charging Standard, and CHAdeMO. The CHAdeMO was dominant around the world. That was a Japanese standard, but it's now being replaced by the SAE standard, the CCS. And I think there's around 50,000 of those being built out right now. So with a 140-mile range bike, there are very few places in the country you can't ride to right now where you can use that standard. Electrify America is a group that's being funded largely from Volkswagen Dieselgate, and they're building thousands of these high-speed chargers all around the country. So it is becoming standardized. Tesla's kind of the only outlier in that right now. But even with Tesla, they have adapters to use the other chargers.
Have you thought about the circular economy for the battery industry as it keeps growing and developing and more vehicles are equipped with batteries? What is the circular economy story for that?
So if I understand your question correctly, the circular economy would be how do we use these batteries after they're removed from... Yeah. Yeah, so currently there's a big push with Second Life batteries, using batteries as power walls in homes and off-grid storage. So typically, when the battery is somewhere between 800 and 2,500 cycles, it's reduced to about 80% of original capacity. And then if it's used in that capacity, it can still have many years life beyond that in grid storage. So I think there's a big push towards reusing batteries in that way. Also, about 50% of current lithium batteries are aluminum cathodes and copper anodes, and those materials can be recycled. So there is effort that's being invested in that area, although I think that there's still a lot more development that can occur. Again, thank you all for attending and for your interest.